Welcome to the Daily Debrief. Good evening, everyone. I'm Aaron Keller. We're going to bring you straight into the Charles Merritt case out of California. This is the Mcstay family murder case where testimony is happening on the West Coast and continuing into the evenings here on the East Coast. So let's listen in to this witness's live testimony.
Did anybody go to the residence with you?
No.
And given that it was February at that time, was it dark when you went to the residence?
Yes.
And did you notice any vehicles in the driveway of the residence?
Yes.
What vehicle did you notice?
There was a Dodge pickup.
Do you remember the color of it?
I do not.
Sure. And when you see that Dodge pickup in the driveway, did you do anything to try and identify who it belonged to?
Not initially.
Did you do that later on at some point?
Okay. Yes.
What exactly did you do to determine who the truck belonged to?
I called the sheriff's department and ran the license plate to see who the registered owner was.
And who did you find out was the registered owner of the vehicle?
Joseph Mcstay.
Now, from the location that you were at, which I'm assuming is in front of the house at first, is that right?
Correct.
Were you able to determine if there appeared to be any other vehicles that were parked in front of that residence that you believed belonged to that residence?
No.
No, that was probably a bad question on my part. No, you didn't do that, or no, you didn't see any?
No, I did not see any.
Okay, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 20. Do you, by any chance, recognize that at all?
I don't.
Okay, it's been
8 years. Yeah,
okay.
It's been a long time.
Okay, but you did describe a Dodge pickup in the driveway, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you arrived at that location, what was it exactly that you did?
I went to the front door. The first thing I do is go to the front door to see if anybody's home. And I noticed, well, I went to the front door and nobody responded to my knocking. So then I went to the south side of the house where there was a gate leading into the backyard, and I opened the gate because dogs were barking, and I could see 2 dogs in the backyard.
Did you enter into the backyard?
I did not. There was a large male Rottweiler cross dog that was guarding his area. So I could see a shed there, and I could see blankets. So I knew they had shelter at that point. So I backed out. I probably was in the yard, maybe a step into the gate, and then I backed out and shut the gate.
Saw the dog, turned around, and hightailed out?
No, hightail. Just need to further look into this.
Okay. After you backed out of the backyard, what did you do next?
I met with a neighbor, Mrs. Anderson, who...
Where did she live in relationship to the house that you were at?
I believe she lived on the north side, immediate north side of the house.
So next door neighbor?
Yes.
Okay. Without telling us what the neighbor said, did you get some information from her in terms of contacting somebody?
Yes.
Whose contact information did she give you?
The brother of the owner.
Would that be Michael Mcstay?
Correct.
Now, when you responded to the location and you drove up, you indicated that you saw a truck in the driveway and you went up to the front door. Did you notice if there were any lights on inside of the residence?
No, it was dark.
And you indicated you knocked on the door, is that right?
Yes.
And it sounded like you were about to say something, that you noticed something at the door.
There was notes left on the door.
What do you remember about the notes that were left on the door?
Asking for Joseph to contact various people.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you spoke with Ms. Anderson and you got some information from her for Mike Mcstay. Did you reach out to Mr. Mcstay and call him?
I did. I called and left a message on an answering machine for him to give me a call back.
Did you call anybody else?
I did.
Who did you call?
I called the Fallbrook Sheriff Station.
And did you speak with somebody at the Fallbrook Sheriff Station?
I spoke to a dispatcher.
And what exactly did you tell them?
I asked for a welfare check to be conducted at that location.
Now, did you wait for the sheriff's department to actually arrive to do the welfare check?
No.
Why not?
My phone rang, and Michael Mcstay called me back, and in our conversation, he informed me that he had contacted the Fallbrook Sheriff's Station, and they had done a welfare check earlier that week. So while I'm talking to him, I got on my radio with dispatch to cancel that welfare check. And at that point, my dispatcher told me that the sheriff had already contacted her and said they had been there, confirmed they had done a welfare check, and had found nothing amiss.
Did you get any information about when that welfare check had taken place?
No, I'm talking from a dispatcher to a dispatcher, so...
Okay. Now, when you go out on calls, if there's not somebody at the residence, do you do anything to alert them that you were there?
Yes, I post, depending on what I find, there's different notices we post.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 582. Can you tell me if you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's what we call a calling card, or an ACD-29 from the County of San Diego. It's basically letting an owner know that we responded to a complaint at their house and to give us a call.
Okay. And that's the one I showed you. 582. Showing you the exhibit that we just talked about, and you indicated that you recognize that. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Now, Ms. Conwell, there's a date on there of January 31st of 2010, and what you've testified to is that you were at the house on February 14th of 2010. Can you explain this discrepancy?
It's an incorrect date, obviously. A lot of times I fill these cards out with the date and my signature at the bottom just for speed. As I'm posting, I write down the activity number and what I need the owner to do. And obviously this one got past me. Wrong date.
Okay, so the date that you were there was actually February 14th.
Yes.
Is there anything about this notice, or this calling card as you've referred to it, that you can actually look at any reports that you've prepared?
We are going to take a break from the Mcstay family murder case in California because it looks like a verdict is about to come in the Melanie Eam case in Florida. This is a case where a young woman was accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death. Let's look into the courtroom now as people are starting to convene in that case. This case was tried once and resulted in a hung jury. The issue wasn't that jurors wanted to acquit or convict, but rather that jurors were afraid or couldn't decide, rather, on the severity of the crime. They were split as to severity. Let's listen into what's happening in court.
All right, counsel may be seated. Welcome back. Has the jury reached a verdict? If you can hand the verdict to the deputy, please. To see if you would rise for publication of the jury verdict.
In the court of the 15th Judicial Circuit Criminal Division in and for Palm Beach County, Florida, case number 2016 CF011454 AMB Division W, State of Florida versus Melanie Eam. Verdict. We find the jury finds as follows. We find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder as contained in the information. If you find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, you must answer the next following question. Did the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the beneficiary concealed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon? Yes. So say all, this 10th day of January 2019 in West Palm Beach, Florida, in Palm Beach County, Florida. Signed by the jury poll.
You may be seated. Does the defense wish to have the jury poll?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's been a request to poll the jury. What that means is the clerk is going to ask each of you whether the verdict as read is your verdict. If the verdict as read is your verdict, you simply say yes. If the verdict as read is not your verdict, obviously say no. We're going to do this by number, not by name. So we'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You may poll.
Jury number 1, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes.
Jury number 2, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes.
Jury number 3, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes.
Jury number 4, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes.
Jury number 5, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes.
Jury number 6, was the verdict as read your verdict?
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your service on this jury. There should be, I think there was a certificate of appreciation. Do we put the certificates out already, Deputy? We do. You should have a certificate of appreciation signed by the Chief Judge of the 15th Judicial Circuit. I certainly want to extend my appreciation to you, appreciation of the citizens of Palm Beach County, and of course the attorneys and the parties wish to extend their thanks for your service here. Attached to the question, the certificate of appreciation, there should be a questionnaire. For lack of better...
Coming in there in the Melanie Eam case out of Florida, where just moments ago you heard a judge deliver that verdict, publishing it. Melanie Eam guilty of second-degree murder. Jurors agreed with the state that she stabbed her boyfriend, despite the defense claim that it was another man in the house, a trained butcher who had experience with knives, who was the true killer. That's what the defense claimed, but nobody seemed to buy it. I want to bring Judge Ashley Wilcott into the discussion. She's in the studio here. So, Judge, first time around, this jury was split. 4 wanted to convict her of that very charge, second-degree murder. 2 wanted to knock this down to manslaughter. This jury said no, guilty across the board as charged.
That's right. So I'm not too surprised. They didn't take very long to deliberate. And I think in spite of defense's argument, the prosecution obviously showed beyond a reasonable doubt that none of her story really made sense and all the pieces fit together.
Okay, so we listened to testimony from this person that the defense claims is the real killer. Apparently, jurors bought his testimony. He seemed credible on the stand to me, and apparently they agreed that he was actually trying to save this victim's life.
Obviously, they did find him credible, but I think, Aaron, it's in conjunction with some of the evidence that was presented that, for instance, her family told her to turn her in. Well, she hadn't done anything. Why would they say to turn her in? She did flee and leave the state. Some of those other things build into that as well as his credibility. I
agree with that as well. Okay, so we had a short trial here. Jurors came back with a short verdict. Apparently, they also believed the police who went to interview her and who said that they obtained a confession.
Right. So the concern with that by the defense was it was coerced. And, in fact, the defense in closing said, listen, a lot of these answers are inaudible. We don't even know what the answers were. This is not a confession. This was a scared witness who made a statement. Obviously, the jury believed and found credible the police that, no, this was an actual confession.
All right, as we heard it just moments ago here on Law and Crime, a verdict again in the Melanie Eam case, guilty in that case of second-degree murder for the young woman accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death. The two were in an on-again, off-again relationship, the prosecutors said, and when there was a final breakup, that is when the stabbing happened. We will continue to monitor what's happening in that courtroom to get a sentencing date. We're going to go back after this quick break, though, to the Mcstay case in California. First, though, this. To the Debrief, folks. You're taking a look at a live picture of the defendant, Charles Merritt, in the so-called Mcstay family murder case out of California. We're going to get into cross-examination of a witness in just a second. I want to read, in the meantime, what's happening in the Melanie Eam courtroom. We just watched the verdict come in, guilty of second-degree murder with a weapon. She faces a possibility of anywhere between 10 years and life for that crime when she is sentenced on April 3rd at 1:30. We will monitor that here at Law and Crime. Meantime, back into the Mcstay courtroom. This is testimony from an animal control officer in San Diego County who was called to the home of the victims to look at abandoned animals that were not receiving care. Let's listen to what's happening.
When you spoke to Mr. Mcstay about the welfare check we discussed earlier, did you ask him who actually requested the check, or did he inform you of that?
I believe he told me he requested the welfare check.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Just briefly, regardless of who requested the welfare check, you were informed by the Sheriff's Department that a welfare check had already been conducted on that home. Is that right?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Anything else? No, Your Honor. Any objection? Ms. Conwell, be excused.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you for your attendance and your excuse. And you can call your next witness.
If you want to call Sergeant Michael Tingley, please.
Looks like we're watching witnesses switch now in the Mcstay family murder case out of California. Defendant Charles Merritt, he goes by Chase, is facing charges over the deaths of Joseph Mcstay, his wife Summer, and their 2 children. The bottom line here, Joseph Mcstay was a business partner of Charles Merritt. There were some debts, money changed hands, and prosecutors say the motive for that defendant you're looking at right now live in a courtroom in California was simple greed, and that's why prosecutors say he committed the crime. Let's talk quickly about this case. Ann Bremner is an attorney who's joining us live here on the Daily Debrief. I still have Ashley Wilcott along with me as we watch testimony go into the evening in this case. Ann, what do you make of this? This case has gotten off to a bit of a bumpy start from my perspective. A lot of wrangling back and forth. Yesterday, one of the witnesses, one of the brothers of Joseph Mcstay, basically popped out with a statement about that defendant's criminal record. That led to all sorts of objections, and we're only a couple of days into what's supposed to be a several-month-long trial.
Yeah, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, right? And it's not an interesting bumpy ride so far. It seems to be some fumbles along the way. But that kind of a statement about someone's criminal history could lead to a real appellate issue, of course, and then basically having some bad stops and starts, and it's not very soon into the case. So a bad beginning can make a bad end.
Yeah, Judge Wilcott, the judge decided after these objections to let the thing roll along, and part of it was because he said the attorneys didn't object fast enough to the witness saying, well, the reason that Chase Merritt didn't want to go into the missing family's home was because he had a criminal record, and he was afraid that if he was in the home, that would get him in even more trouble. So there's a lot of issues. Normally we don't want that brought up. It was, I believe the order of it was that it was brought up by a witness, but it was a statement from the defendant himself as to why he didn't want to go into the home. So it's a huge ball of wax to unravel legally.
Absolutely it is. And don't forget, the other piece of it is, I believe that the defense in opening statement actually referenced a criminal record, if I don't remember incorrectly. And so with these different pieces, they do have to unravel it. And the problem is they need to do it in a better way so as to not delay the trial and bore the jury.
We're going to dip back into that case, the Mcstay family murder case out of California. A new witness has taken a stand.
You would conduct patrol in neighborhoods, traffic-related incidences, missing persons, assaults, domestic violence incidences, anything called into our dispatch center.
And at the time, or even if it's still currently, you can tell us, if you as a deputy were dispatched to or sent to a call involving something really serious, such as a homicide, a kidnapping, a bank robbery, did you tend to hand off that assignment to someone else at some point?
Yes, we have protocol and policies set in place for certain incidences. If it's a homicide, the deputies would respond to the incident, secure the scene, call out our homicide team. If it was a child abuse incident or a sexual assault and it fit the criteria for our sexual assault team or child abuse team, the same protocol would stand. The deputy would respond, find out the details of the case, and then contact a detective.
With a special unit?
Yes, sir.
In that case, what would it be?
In this case, as far as...
In the case you did, like, it was, I think, a child sexual assault.
Like it was a sexual assault, child abuse case. You would contact our sexual assault on-call sergeant, who would then assign a detective to respond to your location.
And as a patrol deputy, was it your practice to err on the side of caution and at least check with those specialized units before continuing further in any type of assignment?
Yes, anytime that we feel that the case is a potential chance to go to that unit or a specific unit, we always encourage our deputies to err on the side of caution and call and find out if they're going to be responding and or what their wishes are. Sometimes they actually request for us to continue, and that they would receive the report the next day and handle the follow-up as required. Sometimes they choose to actually come out and handle the scene right there, and they will give you instructions over the phone.
So in those general situations where they come out and do take over, what is your job then at that point?
You stop. As long as your conversation on the phone with that detective that's assigned to the case, essentially will be assigned to that case, they will tell you, go ahead, lock the scene down, and secure it, and we'll be out. And that's exactly what you do.
And we were listening to a couple of seconds of testimony from this new witness in the Mcstay family murder case out of California. He was an officer who was on patrol. We're, of course, going to continue our live coverage if you're sticking with us on the Law and Crime Network. For those of you watching on Cox media stations, we're going to wrap up with a quick discussion. Ann Bremner is still with me on the line here, along with Judge Ashley Wilcott, listening to this case, trying to break it all down. Ann, we were talking about this being a really bumpy ride. Where does it go? If this is going to take 4 to 6 months to try, what do prosecutors have to do here?
Well, they've got to even it out, and they've got to basically be a lot more deliberate in terms of putting on their evidence, kind of brick by brick, make sure all the pieces of the puzzle fit and make sense to the jury as they go along. And I always have an objection that I think of, which is objection boring, when I'm against this kind of testimony. And the jurors are thinking the same thing. This is a really important case. It's about 4 souls that are gone. It's been going on for a decade. There's a lot of passion you can put into this case. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence you can put together in this case. It's compelling. They need to do it the right way. Given they've had a bumpy start, put it behind them and move on and do it graciously and flawlessly.
I agree. I'd like to see some more trial advocacy here coming out of the state. Ann, I want to thank you for joining us. Judge Wilcott, I'll ask your opinion very quickly. We have less than a minute left.
Just that they have to be more compelling, and they are not following basic rules of trial skills in terms of the form of the question. If they could shore that up, it would be better.
Eliminate the objections and move this thing along. I agree with that as well. Thank you again, Judge, for joining us. Again, for those of you watching on the Law and Crime Network, our live coverage of the Mcstay family murder case will continue after this break. For those of you watching on Cox media stations, thanks for joining us on the Daily Debrief. We hope you'll switch over to Law and Crime for more coverage.